The auction hall was alive with noise, flashing lights, and the clamor of alien voices. Bidders from countless worlds crowded the room, all eager to claim the rarest creatures in the galaxy. Kai, a human soldier, stepped carefully through the crowd, his armor clinking softly with each movement. He had seen many strange things during his years in battle, but even he had to admit that this was different. Creatures of all sizes and shapes were displayed in glass and metal enclosures, their eyes wide and wary, their bodies tense with fear. Some were covered in scales that shimmered like jewels, while others had feathers that glowed faintly in the dim light. Kai's eyes scanned the room, searching not for the largest or most dangerous creatures, but for something that needed a chance. That was when he saw her. In a small, unassuming cage in the corner, a lone female dragon crouched, her wings folded tightly against her body. Around her, 5 tiny hatchlings huddled together, their scales still soft and their movements clumsy. Most of the other bidders ignored them, seeing them as weak, fragile, and not worth their attention. But Kai felt a pull in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years, a need to protect, to care, to give life a chance. The auctioneer's voice boomed, calling attention to the next lot. Lot 47. A rare dragon and her 5 hatchlings. Who will start the bidding? The crowd stirred, but no one seemed eager. Some whispered that the creatures would not survive long in the wild, that they were too small and vulnerable. Kai stepped closer, studying the mother dragon's dark eyes. They were wary, intelligent, and filled with a quiet strength. She looked at him as if she could sense his thoughts, judging him silently. The auctioneer called for bids. 10,000 credits, a wealthy alien shouted, waving a clawed hand. A few other bids followed, each higher than the last. Kai had no plan to buy a dragon, and he certainly did not intend to spend much, but something inside him refused to let them be left behind. When the bidding reached 30,000 credits, he raised his hand, offering 50,000. A hush fell over the crowd. No one expected a human soldier, someone outside the wealthy elite, to compete for such rare creatures. The auctioneer hesitated, then called out, 50,000 credits. Do I hear 55? No one answered. Kai raised his hand slightly, signaling that he would go higher. The crowd buzzed with surprise, whispers running through the rows of spectators. The mother dragon lifted her head, tilting it slightly, and the hatchlings stirred, their tiny eyes focusing on him. It felt as if they recognized him already, though he had never met them. Finally, the last bidder gave up. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Sold. To the human soldier. The room erupted with murmurs and shocked expressions. Some laughed, thinking the purchase foolish. Others shook their heads, muttering that a human had no idea what he was getting into. Kai barely noticed. He walked to the enclosure, unlocking it carefully and opening the small gate. The mother dragon shifted back, her body tense, but she did not attack. Instead, she stayed still, watching him with cautious curiosity. Kai stepped closer, holding out his hands. It's okay, he said softly. I won't hurt you. I just want to help. The mother dragon's nostrils flared as she sniffed the air, taking in his scent. The hatchlings squeaked and clambered over each other, some brushing against his boots. One tiny dragon, slightly smaller than the others, blinked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Kai felt a warmth in his chest, a bond forming even in the first moments of contact. He lifted the hatchlings one by one, placing them in a special containment crate he had brought on board his ship. The mother dragon followed him cautiously, her wings twitching nervously. Kai kept his movements slow and deliberate, speaking softly the entire time. He had handled dangerous creatures in battle, but this was different. These dragons were not weapons. They were beings capable of fear, intelligence, and trust. By the time Kai secured the dragons in the crate, the auction hall had quieted down, most of the other bidders lost in disbelief or gossip. He carried the crate to his ship, a small freighter waiting at the docking bay. The engines hummed as he prepared for departure, the doors closing behind him. The mother dragon pressed herself against the crate, her eyes never leaving him. She was tense, but there was no aggression, only curiosity and a cautious hope. As the ship lifted off, Kai looked down at the bustling city below. He had no plan for the dragons beyond keeping them safe, but he knew that he had done the right thing. Something in him had shifted, a spark of purpose he had not felt since leaving the battlefield. These creatures, so small and vulnerable, had chosen him without words, and he had accepted them. For the first time in years, Kai felt the quiet thrill of possibility. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, but for now he had a mission: to protect this dragon family, to learn their ways, and perhaps in time to teach them to trust him completely. He did not yet know what challenges lay ahead, but he was ready. The mother dragon lowered her head slightly as if acknowledging him, and one of the hatchlings squeaked and nuzzled his hand. Kai smiled. In that moment he realized that life could surprise him in ways no battlefield ever could. This was not just a purchase or a gamble, it was the beginning of something extraordinary. And for the first time he felt that even a hardened soldier could be more than a fighter. He could be a protector, a guardian, and perhaps, one day, a father to these dragons. The ship soared through the stars, carrying Kai and his new charges toward an uncertain future. The mother dragon watched him carefully, her eyes reflecting a cautious trust. The hatchlings stirred in their crate, curious and brave in small ways. Kai leaned back in his seat, feeling a mix of anticipation and determination. He knew the days ahead would test him, but he also knew that they would be worth it. He had taken a chance, and already the universe was showing him that some risks were meant to change everything. Kai's ship hummed quietly as it glided through the endless stretch of stars. Inside the cargo bay, the mother dragon, Saphira, paced restlessly while her 5 hatchlings huddled together, squeaking softly. Kai had never cared for creatures like this before. In the military, everything was about orders, strategy, and survival. But these dragons were different. They required patience, understanding, and something he hadn't expected: empathy. The first few days were the hardest. Saphira refused to eat, keeping herself low to the ground, wings folded tightly. Her babies, small and fragile, clung to her, squeaking whenever Kai approached. He tried simple methods, offering food, speaking softly, and even gently touching her snout. But Saphira only recoiled, letting out low, rumbling growls. Kai realized he couldn't force trust. He had to earn it. He spent hours each day sitting near the dragons, speaking quietly, letting them watch him without moving too fast. Slowly they began to notice him without fear. He noticed small things: the flick of a tail, a curious blink, a baby dragon leaning slightly forward to sniff the air around him. One hatchling, smaller than the rest and braver, often stepped closer to Kai than the others. Its scales shimmered a faint gold in the ship's lights. He decided to name her Ember. Kai learned that feeding the hatchlings required careful timing and patience. Their mouths were tiny and food had to be broken into small pieces. Ember often tried to grab food from him directly, and each time, Kai would laugh softly, careful not to frighten her. Slowly the other hatchlings began to imitate her, reaching out, tasting, and exploring. Saphira watched silently at first, then began to relax slightly when she saw Kai was gentle with her babies. The bond grew in small moments. Kai discovered that dragons could communicate through subtle gestures. A flick of a tail, the tilt of a head, or a quiet squeak could mean curiosity, caution, or even trust. He learned to watch carefully, matching their rhythm and responding to their signals. At night, he would leave a soft blanket on the floor, allowing the hatchlings to curl up beside him. Ember, braver than the others, would often climb onto his shoulder, resting there as he monitored the ship's systems. Kai realized the dragons were not just creatures to protect. They were intelligent beings capable of understanding and emotion. He began to speak to them more, telling stories of his life, of the planets he had visited, and even of battles he had fought. Ember seemed to understand more than the others, cocking her head as he spoke and sometimes squeaking in response. Saphira, though still wary, watched these interactions silently, her body language slowly softening. Days passed, and the dragons began to explore their small part of the ship. The hatchlings wobbled as they tried to walk on metal floors, occasionally tumbling into each other or knocking over small containers. Kai laughed, something he hadn't done in a long time. Saphira's protective instincts were strong. She would nudge them back if they wandered too close to edges or the engine area. Kai respected her boundaries, learning that trust was a two-way street. One evening, a sudden alarm blared on the ship. Kai rushed to the controls, checking sensors, but there was no immediate threat. The dragons, startled by the noise, huddled together. He knelt beside them, speaking softly. Ember, sensing his calm, crawled over his arm, letting him hold her close. It was a small gesture, but to Kai it meant more than words. It was a first sign that the dragons trusted him completely, even in moments of fear. Kai also noticed that the dragons had personalities. Ember was bold, curious, and playful. Another hatchling, smaller and quieter, stayed close to Saphira, observing everything. A third tried to mimic Ember's actions, often clumsily but with determination. Kai began to recognize their individuality, adjusting his care for each. Feeding, playtime, and quiet moments were all tailored to their needs. He realized that bonding with them wasn't just about protection. It was about connection, understanding, and respect. By the end of the week, Saphira was eating again. Kai had prepared a small area in the cargo bay with soft bedding, fresh water, and containers of food. She cautiously approached, sniffing the dishes, then eating with careful movements. The hatchlings, encouraged by their mother's actions, followed suit. Kai watched with pride, knowing it had taken patience and persistence to reach this point. Kai began to feel a deeper connection. The dragons no longer saw him as an intruder or a threat. Instead, they recognized him as a caretaker, a protector, and in some small way a part of their family. Ember, the boldest of the hatchlings, would often crawl into his lap, nuzzle his hand, or follow him as he moved around the ship. Kai realized he had grown attached, feeling emotions he had long suppressed during his years of war. One night, as Kai lay on the floor near the dragons, he watched Ember curl up against his chest while the others slept nearby. Saphira rested her head close to him, eyes half closed in a gesture of trust. He reached out and stroked her scales gently, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his fingers. It was a quiet moment, yet it carried more meaning than any victory he had ever achieved in battle. Kai knew challenges lay ahead. He was aware that the galaxy was full of danger and that creatures like these would attract attention. But for now he allowed himself to bask in the small victories. A hatchling trusting him, Saphira eating without fear, Ember nuzzling his hand. These moments of connection were rare and precious. They reminded him that strength was not always measured in weapons or combat. It could also be measured in patience, care, and the ability to inspire trust. As the stars passed by the ship's windows, Kai felt a new purpose. He had started this journey as a soldier with a sudden impulse to save creatures others ignored. Now he was more than that. He was a guardian, a teacher, and a part of a family he never expected to find. The dragons had changed him as much as he had changed them. And among the 5 small hatchlings, one had begun to show a spark of courage and recognition that surprised him the most. Ember would follow him everywhere, chirping softly, sometimes leaning against his shoulder. Kai smiled, realizing that their bond was growing stronger with each passing day. The journey was only beginning, and he knew that together, they could face whatever the universe sent their way. In that quiet, moving moment, surrounded by dragons and stars, Kai understood something profound. Family was not only made of blood. Sometimes it was made of trust, patience, and the choice to protect those who needed you most. And slowly, day by day, the dragons had chosen him. The stars outside Kai's ship seemed calm, but the quiet was deceptive. Kai had grown comfortable with the dragons, and for a few days the universe had felt safe. That peace shattered one morning when the ship's sensors blared a warning. Multiple craft were approaching fast, their shapes unfamiliar but clearly armed. Kai rushed to the controls, heart pounding. His first thought was the dragons. They were still young, fragile, and unprepared for battle. "Stay calm," he whispered to Saphira, who was pacing nervously. Her wings twitched and the hatchlings squeaked in alarm. Kai quickly activated the ship's defense shields, but he knew that he couldn't rely on technology alone. These pursuers were skilled, and their weapons could pierce the strongest hull if they got too close. The dragons sensed the tension and began to move instinctively. Ember clung to his shoulder, small but determined, while the other hatchlings pressed close to Saphira. Kai could see the enemy ships now, glinting against the blackness of space. They were bounty hunters, notorious across several star systems for taking rare creatures to sell on the black market. The dragons' unique genetic traits made them highly valuable. Kai clenched his fists. He had fought enemies before, but never for creatures so innocent, so dependent on him. The first attack came suddenly. Energy blasts streaked past the ship, shaking it violently. Kai shouted, "Hold steady," as he maneuvered between the stars. Saphira lowered her head and flared her wings, a low growl vibrating in her throat. Her hatchlings squealed, frightened but clinging to her. Kai realized that the dragons were not just scared, they were preparing to defend themselves. The bounty hunters' ships closed in, firing again. Kai made quick decisions, weaving through asteroid fields and space debris. Saphira and her babies reacted in astonishing ways. The mother dragon opened her wings and, with a powerful push, sent the ship gliding faster than Kai thought possible. Ember squeaked, stretching her tiny wings, as if she understood the danger and wanted to help. Kai had never flown with dragons before. He had trained in aerial combat, but nothing compared to this. He watched as Saphira's instincts guided them, dodging attacks with grace and precision. Ember and the other hatchlings began to mimic their mother, small but effective, their movements coordinated in ways Kai could hardly believe. It was as if the dragons had been born to fight together, even at their size. One of the bounty hunters' ships broke through the defenses, firing a beam that struck the cargo bay. Kai braced himself, pushing Saphira and the hatchlings back toward the center. Sparks flew as metal groaned, and the young dragons huddled closer to their mother. Kai shouted, "Stay with me. You're safe." The words felt small against the chaos, but the dragons responded, moving closer to him as he guided them. Ember, braver than the rest, flapped her wings and lunged at one of the attacker's smaller craft. Her movement was clumsy but surprisingly effective, throwing off the enemy's aim for a brief moment. Kai's heart leapt. Even the smallest of the hatchlings were capable of courage and action. He realized that trust and love had awakened something in them, a spark of loyalty and bravery that no bounty hunter could understand. The battle raged, but Kai and the dragons worked together. Saphira breathed fire carefully, avoiding harming the hatchlings, but powerful enough to push back the attackers. Ember squeaked in excitement, watching her mother, and even the other hatchlings tried to imitate the actions. Kai had never seen anything like it. They were a team, a family fighting together to survive. After what felt like hours, the bounty hunters finally retreated, realizing they could not capture the dragons without risking their own ships. The alarms stopped and the ship floated in silence among the stars. Kai's chest heaved, sweat on his brow, but he felt a deep satisfaction. He looked around at the dragons who were shaken but unharmed. Saphira nuzzled him lightly, and Ember pressed her head against his shoulder. Kai realized something important. These creatures whom he had saved on a whim were more than dragons. They were sentient, loyal, and capable of forming bonds. They had risked themselves for him and he had protected them in return. The experience was terrifying, exhausting, but it had also changed him. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. A deep connection, a sense of family that went beyond species. For the next few hours, Kai tended to the dragons, calming them, giving them food and checking for injuries. Saphira's eyes softened, and the hatchlings relaxed as they curled around her. Ember, tired but alert, looked up at Kai with wide eyes that seemed to say, "We're okay thanks to you." It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Kai smiled. He understood then that danger would not stop them. The galaxy was full of threats, but the bond between him and the dragons made them strong. Together they had survived an attack that would have destroyed most teams. He could see it in their eyes, they trusted him completely and he trusted them in return. Kai settled near the dragons, keeping watch through the ship's viewport. The stars were calm again, but he knew that this was only the beginning. The universe would test them again and he had to be ready. But he also knew that with Saphira and her hatchlings, he was no longer alone. They had proven themselves brave, intelligent, and loyal. That night, as the ship sailed through empty space, Kai lay beside the dragons. Ember curled onto his chest, and the other hatchlings nestled against Saphira. Kai reached out, brushing a hand over the mother dragon's head, feeling the warmth and strength beneath her scales. For the first time he allowed himself to imagine a future, not just as a soldier but as a protector, a father, and part of a family that spanned species. The battle had been terrifying, but it had shown him something incredible. Courage was not just in fighting enemies, it was in protecting those who could not protect themselves, in earning trust, and in forming bonds that no weapon could break. Kai smiled, feeling a sense of purpose stronger than any mission he had ever known. Tomorrow he knew would bring new challenges. But tonight he was content. He had dragons who trusted him, a mother who accepted him, and hatchlings who looked to him with hope. Together they were not just surviving, they were becoming a family. And in a galaxy that often valued strength above all, Kai understood that true power lay in loyalty, love, and the bonds that made them strong. The battle had ended, but Kai's heart still raced. The ship floated quietly among the stars, the aftermath of the attack leaving him and the dragons shaken but unharmed. Saphira rested her massive head on the floor, eyes half closed but alert. The hatchlings clung to her, trembling slightly, while Ember, the boldest of the group, crawled onto Kai's shoulder and chirped softly. Kai watched her, realizing just how much courage the small dragons had shown. Kai spent the next hours checking the ship and the dragons. He inspected the hatchlings for scrapes and soot, brushing his hands gently over their soft scales. Saphira shifted as he worked, watching him carefully. There was something in her eyes that he had not seen before, trust, cautious but real. Kai had spent weeks earning it and now it seemed solid. As he finished tending to them, Kai sat down on the floor of the cargo bay. Ember hopped onto his knee, nuzzling against his chest. He laughed softly. "You're braver than I thought, little one," he said. Ember chirped again and Kai felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. It was not just pride, it was something deeper, a sense of connection that went beyond words. He looked at the other hatchlings who were slowly exploring their surroundings again, encouraged by Ember's boldness. Saphira moved closer, her wings slightly extended but no longer tense. Kai reached out and touched her snout gently. She flinched at first, then pressed her forehead against his hand. It was a silent acknowledgement, a gesture of respect and acceptance. Kai felt his chest tighten. He had never imagined that a dragon could recognize a human in such a way. Days passed and the dragons began to act more naturally. They followed Kai around the ship, played among themselves and rested near him without fear. Ember was especially attached, always staying close, sometimes climbing onto his shoulder as he worked. One evening, after feeding the dragons and making sure they were comfortable, Kai settled on the floor to rest. Ember hopped into his lap, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Then it happened. Ember let out a soft, almost human-like sound. "Dad." Kai froze. The word hung in the air, and he stared at the tiny dragon in disbelief. He had heard some stories of dragons mimicking sounds, even human speech, but never like this. Ember repeated it, squeaking clearly, and the other hatchlings stirred, chirping in response. Saphira raised her head slowly, looking at Kai with eyes that seemed to say, "You are family." Kai's mind raced. Could it be true? The dragons were not just intelligent. They were sentient, capable of forming deep emotional bonds. Ember's recognition of him as a father figure was more than imitation. It was understanding. He reached out, holding Ember close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest. The warmth, trust, and loyalty in that small creature were overwhelming. Saphira shifted, moving closer to Kai. Her presence was protective but calm, a silent acceptance of him as part of her family. The other hatchlings began to mimic Ember's sounds in small ways, squeaking and chirping toward Kai. It was a recognition that he had never expected but had worked toward for weeks. He realized that in the eyes of these dragons he was not just a caretaker, he was a parent, a protector, a guardian of their family. Kai spent the next hours observing them, amazed at their behavior. They interacted with him as if he were one of them, responding to his movements, his voice, and even his emotions. Ember climbed onto his shoulder and nuzzled his neck, and the other hatchlings followed suit, staying close to Saphira. Kai felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. These were not pets. They were family, and he was responsible for their safety, growth, and happiness. Word of the human who had bonded with dragons began to spread slowly through the colonies. Kai received messages from curious scientists and soldiers alike, asking how he had managed it. He shrugged off their questions, focusing on the dragons. He did not need recognition from others. The dragons themselves were his reward. Their trust and affection were more valuable than any praise or credit. Night came and Kai lay down among the dragons. Ember curled against his chest, the others nestled around Saphira. Kai reached out to the mother dragon, stroking her scales gently. She rested her head near him, her eyes soft and calm. He realized that this moment was a turning point. The dragons had accepted him fully, and he had accepted them in return. They were no longer creatures he was protecting. They were his family, and he was theirs. Kai thought about the future. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, and danger could return at any moment. But he also knew that together, they were stronger than he had ever imagined. The trust between him and the dragons was unbreakable, built on weeks of patience, care, and shared experiences. Ember's word, the simple call of "Dad," had changed everything. It had solidified the bond, proving that family was not defined by species or circumstance, but by loyalty, love, and recognition. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in years. The battles he had fought as a soldier had taught him discipline and courage, but this bond with dragons, taught him something greater. The power of connection, the strength of trust, and the meaning of family. Kai closed his eyes for a moment, holding Ember and feeling the warmth of Saphira nearby. He understood that this recognition was only the beginning. The dragons had accepted him as one of their own, and in turn he had found purpose beyond the battlefield. The universe could throw any challenge at them, but together they were no longer just a human and dragons. They were a family. As the stars glimmered outside the ship's viewport, Kai made a silent promise to the dragons. He would protect them, guide them, and nurture them. He would be the father they had chosen him to be. And in that quiet, glowing moment, surrounded by the soft breathing of dragons and the hum of the ship, Kai felt hope, pride, and a love stronger than any weapon he had ever wielded. The bond was real. The recognition was clear. And in that simple word, "Dad," a new chapter of their journey had begun. A chapter of trust, love, and a family that spanned species, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. The ship sailed quietly through the endless stars, carrying Kai and his dragon family to an uncertain future. Danger had tested them and they had survived together. But now, for the first time, there was a sense of peace. Saphira walked through the cargo bay gracefully, her wings slightly extended but calm, while the 5 hatchlings explored their surroundings, squeaking and tumbling over one another. Ember stayed close to Kai, perched on his shoulder, occasionally nuzzling his neck. The bond between human and dragons had grown stronger with every day. Kai looked around at them and felt something he had never expected, a deep, steady pride. He had entered the auction hall thinking only of saving creatures that no one else wanted. Now he had a family, a purpose, and a connection that transcended worlds and species. Each hatchling had a unique personality. Ember was brave and curious, always testing boundaries. One of the others was cautious and observant, staying close to Saphira for comfort. The remaining 3 were playful, exploring with a mix of curiosity and mischief. Watching them grow and interact filled Kai with a sense of wonder. The galaxy, vast and unpredictable, still held dangers. But Kai no longer faced it alone. The dragons were more than companions, they were allies, partners, and children who trusted him completely. Together they could navigate the perils that lay ahead. Kai spent his days training them gently, teaching them to control their abilities and react wisely. Saphira was patient but firm, showing her babies how to fly and use their fire safely. Kai watched, sometimes amazed, as the hatchlings learned quickly, responding to guidance and even anticipating his instructions. The first sign of their growing strength came unexpectedly. While exploring a new planet, Kai allowed the hatchlings to fly in a small, open valley. Ember soared ahead, confident and joyful, while the others followed, sometimes stumbling but always recovering. Saphira flew above, protective but encouraging. Kai ran along the ground, watching them, calling their names, and feeling the surge of pride as they practiced their wings and coordination. The connection between them was visible in every movement. Word of Kai and his dragons began to spread slowly through the colonies. Stories of a human soldier who had bonded with dragons traveled between planets. People were fascinated not just by the dragons themselves, but by the relationship Kai had built. They spoke of loyalty, courage, and love, qualities that transcended species. Kai received messages from other humans, curious scientists, and military personnel, asking for advice or wishing to see the dragons. Kai smiled at the messages but focused on his family. Their bond was private, sacred, and he wanted it to grow without outside interference. One day, as the family rested near a cliff overlooking a wide alien forest, Kai realized how far they had come. Ember climbed onto his shoulder, the other hatchlings played nearby, and Saphira stretched her wings in the sunlight. Kai took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the moment. He could see the future stretching out before them, full of challenges but also possibilities. This family, human and dragons together, represented something rare in the galaxy: trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. Kai began to teach the dragons more than survival skills. He taught them about exploration, about the worlds they had yet to see, and about the choices they could make. Ember listened closely, tilting her head as if understanding every word. The others watched quietly, absorbing lessons in their own ways. Saphira guided them with a careful but firm presence, and Kai realized that together, they were shaping a new generation, dragons who would carry trust, courage, and intelligence across the galaxy. The family faced challenges, of course. Pirates, harsh planets, and the occasional aggressive creature tested their skills. But every time Kai and the dragons emerged stronger. Saphira's strategic instincts, Ember's bravery, and the careful coordination of the hatchlings made them a formidable team. Kai was no longer just a soldier, he was a leader, a teacher, and a parent. The dragons had given him purpose, and he had given them safety and guidance in return. As months passed, the bond between them deepened. Ember began to call Kai Dad more frequently, and the other hatchlings began to mimic her, using the word in their own soft, playful ways. Saphira responded with gentle gestures, nudging Kai when he entered the room, curling near him when they rested, and watching over the hatchlings as they slept. Kai laughed quietly, feeling a joy he had never known before. This family was extraordinary not because of strength or wealth, but because of the love and trust they shared. Kai often thought about the auction, the moment he had made the impulsive decision to buy the dragons. He realized it had changed everything. A simple choice had brought him into a family he never imagined, given him purpose beyond survival, and allowed him to teach the galaxy a powerful lesson. Humans were capable of empathy, courage, and leadership in ways that could inspire even the most unlikely allies. One evening, the family watched an alien sunset from a cliff edge. Ember perched on Kai's shoulder, nuzzling his cheek, while the other hatchlings played in the grass nearby. Saphira's wings glowed in the golden light as she stretched and then settled beside Kai. He reached out to stroke her scales, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his hand. He realized that this was home, not a place but the people and creatures who trusted and loved him. Kai smiled, thinking about the future. They would explore more planets, face dangers and meet other species. But they would do it together as a family. The dragons had changed him, teaching patience, courage and the meaning of love. And he had changed them, giving them trust, guidance and a sense of safety in a vast, unpredictable universe. The stars began to shine as night fell. Kai held Ember close, watching the hatchlings sleep near Saphira. The universe was vast and dangers still lurked, but he felt ready. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. Together they were a new family, a symbol of hope and cooperation across species. Kai knew that whatever the galaxy threw at them, they would face it as one. And in that quiet, glowing moment, surrounded by dragons and stars, Kai understood something profound. Family was not defined by species or blood. It was defined by trust, loyalty and love. With Saphira and her hatchlings, he had found a purpose greater than any battlefield, a connection deeper than any victory. The future was uncertain, but together they would face it with courage, care, and a bond that nothing could break. Kai looked at the dragons, feeling a sense of pride and peace. Ember chirped softly, the other hatchlings responded, and Saphira's gaze met his. In their eyes he saw recognition, respect, and love. He had become more than a soldier, he was a father, a protector, and part of a family that would leave a legacy across the stars. The ship moved on through the galaxy, carrying Kai and his dragons into the unknown. But no matter what challenges awaited, he knew they were ready. Together they had found not just safety, but belonging, courage, and a love that would guide them through every adventure.